To all of you American girls, it's sad to imagine a world without you. American girls, I'd like to be part of the world around you. Driving a car by the seaside, watching the world from the bright side.
Life is Strange is an episodic adventure game released in 2015 by Don't Nod Entertainment, in the same style of the narrative-based Telltale games. Our protagonist is Maxine Caulfield, a photography student who gains the ability to rewind time after saving her childhood friend Chloe Price. The game has become Don't Nod's most successful title, with over 3 million copies sold, and has garnered attention from all corners of the internet. A YouTuber by the name of ER made a video giving his thoughts on the game, and while I agree with some of his arguments, there's a lot that I have a different opinion on, and some things that I think should be cleared up, hence me making this timely response video. I'm going to try and be as succinct as possible while addressing as many of his arguments as I can, so let's start right away and see what he has to say about the game.
So when Don't Nod announced a new IP, Life is Tumblr, I was truthfully a tiny bit excited. Perhaps with all of their talent reined in and focused to a finer point, Don't Nod could really hit this one out of the park. But my hopes soon plummeted when the first previews of the game came out and it was heralded to be episodic. And not only that, they ripped off the Telltale's game formula badly.
I will remember this conversation.
This is speaking as a non-fan of Telltale games, ever since they moved away from more traditional LucasArtsian point-and-click adventure games, like Bone, Sam & Max, and Monkey Island. But maybe, I thought, if Don't Nod was going to cut away, almost everything that makes a game, they could at least concentrate on telling a good story.
ER's first claim here is that Life is Strange isn't really a game, and to be honest, I agree with him for the most part. There is no single perfectly clear definition of what a game is, but Life is Strange, along with the other Telltale games, I view as more of a hybrid form of entertainment, almost like an interactive TV series. Traditionally, video games will have objectives or scores and give you gameplay mechanics to help achieve those objectives and scores. But episodic narrative games are a little different. People don't play Life is Strange to have a high accuracy on hitting the dialogue boxes or The Walking Dead to solve the radio in a record time. The focus is on the story, and the gameplay takes a backseat. Keep in mind that this doesn't make them better or worse than traditional video games, it's just a different format of entertainment. People who are interested in games might not like Life is Strange, and people who don't usually like games but enjoy movies and TV might take a liking to the game, and that's fine. ER goes on to say that Life is Strange rips off the Telltale Games formula, and I think that's just generalizing to an unreasonable extent. League of Legends didn't rip off Dota because they also made a MOBA. In the same train of thought, he says that the early Telltale games were just LucasArtsy and acts like that's fine, so his logic isn't very consistent here. Telltale may have popularized the genre, but it doesn't mean other developers can't make games in the same style. If the protagonist of Life is Strange was a guy called Key Emmeret who meets a kid called Yementine, then, maybe the situation would be different.
Sad to say, when the first episode came out, I got up to this bit before I laughed my ass off and deleted that shit from my computer.
I can tell everybody Nathan Prescott is a punk ass who begs like a little girl and talks to himself.
You don't know who the fuck I am or who you're messing around with.
Then I watched the rest of the season by way of YouTube Let's Plays, because I hate myself.
Here, he just openly admits that he hasn't even played the game, but has proceeded to make a 26-minute video criticizing it, which I have to say is a little worrying. He at least knows the overall narrative, but he's missed out on a lot of alternate dialogue options that he might have chosen, and as a result, there are events that he thinks are concrete in the game, but actually change based on the player's choices, ones that he didn't make. This is going to become apparent later on.
There's just so much wrong with this game that I don't even know where to start. Well, how about the characters? We have Mad Maxine, a very boyish-looking hipster from Arcadia Bay, Oregon. She's a photography student at an art boarding school, and her claim to fame are her selfies. Not even joking. She takes selfies. She's lauded for taking selfies.
ER exaggerates a little here. She is known by her peers for taking selfies.
Mean girls.
Oh look, it's Max Caulfield, the selfie hoe of Blackwell.
And in the latter half of the game, she wins a contest with this photo, but it's not exclusively the only photos she takes. The massive wall of photos featured in the game is all sorts of random scenery shots, and the photos that you take in the game are mostly of the environment around you.
Her personality boils down to the robust decisiveness of Shinji Ikari and the fiery ambition of Katniss Everdeen. That is to say, throughout Life as Tumblr, Maxine does next to nothing of her own volition. She is little more than a personified reaction to the events surrounding her, and she's dragged along by the whims of other, more autonomous characters. She's the epitome of the self-insert surrogate.
I agree with ER on this point, but there's not much that can be done about it. Funnily enough, an inherent flaw in the episodic narrative genre is that we have to play as a character and make choices for them that reflect our own beliefs and values, which means that the character has to be rather generic so everyone can see a part of themselves in the protagonist. If they have too much of their own personality, then a percentage of the player base is being cut off from the outset because they don't agree with who they're playing as. For example, if Max decides to punch Nathan without us having control over the action to demonstrate her having a rash attitude as a personality trait, then those of us who didn't want to punch Nathan immediately feel disconnected from who we're meant to be playing as. There isn't really a solution for this yet, or if there is, I've yet to see it used in an episodic narrative game. Personally, it doesn't bother me when I play these games, but I can understand that some people might perceive Max to be a bland character.
Next up is Chloe. Chloe is, to put it simply, a cunt.
Bang!
Jesus.
A bona fide, grade A, Korra tier cunt. Who could have possibly seen this coming?
Chloe's character is one of ER's biggest problems with the game, so we'll likely be coming back to this issue several times in the video, but for now, let's just have a quick lightning round starring Chloe to see a few of the gripes that ER has with her.
There's just so much cuntiness that it would take way too long to go through all of it. But here are the highlights. Is a high school dropout who apparently does nothing better than smoke weed and live parasitically on her stepfather's dime.
Correct. Chloe is a dropout of Blackwell Academy, the school that Max is currently attending.
Strings along Maxine in every crime she commits and pressures Maxine to abuse her powers whenever she sees fit.
So we should figure out how to best use and abuse your power.
Correct. For the most part, Chloe is the one between the two to come up with schemes that break the law, and she also doesn't take Max's power seriously, often asking her to use it for trivial or self-serving purposes.
Will steal from a handicapped fund.
Correct. There is a choice you can make in the game that results in Chloe stealing a school fund for the handicapped.
Will shoot a man to whom she owes money and his dog with her stepfather's gun just because she can.
Correct. There is a choice you can make in the game that results in Chloe shooting Frank and his dog Pompadour.
Is incapable of doing anything herself and faults everybody but herself for her failings. And so much more.
Correct. There are multiple points in the game where Chloe blames other people but not herself for her problems. Wow. 5 for 5. That is pretty impressive. Chloe certainly has some questionable personality traits. Let's keep things rolling with some more Chloe facts so we can keep hating her. Did you know that Chloe's real father, who she idolized, died in a car crash when she was 14 years old?
Chloe, your dad didn't choose to leave you.
I know that, Max. My mom actually blames herself. Just because she wanted a ride home from work. Sometimes, even I blame her.
No, you don't.
Yes, Max, I do. Do you know what it's like to wait for your father to come home when you're a kid? And he never does?
No, of course not. But I was with you that day. It was just a terrible accident.
I wish that made me feel better. But ever since he died, my life has been dipped in shit. I know it was your birthday last month. This was my real father's camera. I want you to have it.
That's so cool you remembered my birthday. But I can't take this.
Of course you can. My dad would be pissed if I never used it, and now I know it'll be used awesomely.
Did you know that Max, Chloe's best friend, moved to Seattle shortly after the death of Chloe's father, leaving Chloe to cope with her grief alone?
I'm glad you found a good reason to come back.
Don't you think I'm happy to see you?
No. You were happy to wait 5 years without a call or even a text.
I'm sorry. I know things were tough on you when I left.
How do you know? You weren't even here.
I didn't order my parents to move specifically to fuck you over, Chloe.
You've been at Blackwell for almost a month without letting me know. Enough said.
I just wanted to settle in first and not be such a shy, cliche geek. I totally would have contacted you.
I bet you don't use these sad excuses on Mr. Jefferson. Don't use them on me, Max.
Did you know that Rachel, the only friend Chloe made after the death of her father, disappears shortly before the game begins, once again leaving Chloe with no one apart from her overworked mother to connect with?
She was my angel. After my dad died and you moved, I felt abandoned. Rachel saved my life.
Man, I had no idea.
Well, you never made much effort to find out. I was 14. We were best friends.
I never forgot, even if I was an asshole and didn't keep in touch. But you had Rachel.
Rachel had my back. We were gonna kick the world's ass. You would laugh at how different we were. She wanted to be a star.
She looks like a model.
That was her plan. Our plan. Get the hell out of Bigfootville and into Los Angeles.
Now, when did Rachel actually disappear?
6 months ago. She just left Arcadia. Without a word. Without me.
How do you know she disappeared? Maybe she wanted to start a totally new life.
Unlike you, she would have told me, okay? Something happened to her.
I believe you. I'm just trying to get all deductive.
Before Rachel left, she said she met somebody who changed her life. And poof.
And you haven't heard anything from her since?
Like everybody in my life. My dad, you, and Rachel. Gone.
Did you know that Chloe finds Rachel's drugged corpse buried in a junkyard?
Chloe, stop! Look.
Please, no.
Oh, that smell!
Rachel! Oh, Rachel, no, please not her!
Chloe.
Rachel, what?
I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm so sorry.
I loved her so much. How can she be dead? What kind of world does this? Who does this?
Chloe is, to put it simply, a cunt.
Let's revisit what ER pointed out about Chloe. Chloe is a dropout of Blackwell Academy because she took the blame for an incident involving her and Rachel being truant so Rachel could go unpunished. Chloe is the one between the two to come up with schemes that break the law because she is desperate to find Rachel, a girl who at one point was the only person she felt that she could connect to. She doesn't take Max's power seriously, but in the end asks Max to rewind time and let her die to save Arcadia Bay, essentially sacrificing herself. There is a choice you can make in the game that results in Chloe stealing a school fund for the handicapped, because she is on the run from Frank, a drug dealer who she owes money to and has threatened her life. There is a choice you can make in the game that results in Chloe shooting Frank and his dog Pompadour, after the dog rushes Chloe and Frank pulls a gun or knife on her depending on a previous choice. Okay. Does Chloe's background mean we should forgive her for all of her actions? No, absolutely not. Are her actions always justified? No, absolutely not. Chloe has some major flaws in her personality, and on the surface level, she is extremely unlikable. There are, however, redeeming qualities about her. Her unwavering loyalty to Max, her perseverance and unwillingness to give up in search for her friend Rachel, and the acceptance of her own death in the climactic ending of the series if you choose it. Donut could have easily made her a less flawed character who we love and is awesome in every way, but instead they wanted to challenge themselves by creating a character that we know can be absolutely horrible, but still see the good in them. Whether or not you like Chloe as a result of all these factors will vary from person to person, and to be honest, I even agree with ER to an extent, in that I think they pushed Chloe slightly too far in her undesirable personality traits. But the point I'm making here is that it's not as simple as Chloe is a cunt. There are both good things and bad things about her that let each player reach their own conclusion of how they feel about Chloe. I guess that whole idea of being succinct has gone out the window by now. Let's move on.
Then there's Warren, the White Knight.
Sensitive usually means won't be having sex with you.
Oh god. You need a sensitive woman to kick your ass.
If I was lucky.
He's head over heels for Maxine, treats her like royalty, thinks only the absolute best of her, is at her beck and call, and expects diddly squat in return.
You've always treated me like a person. Not a beta nerd.
He's what a lot of adult men look back on and cringe internally at.
I'm feeling pretty alpha now.
Yes, you are.
ER is exaggerating for effect again here, but he makes a decent point. Warren is a pretty subdued character and probably pines for Max a little too much. He just kind of serves as a side dish love interest that you can choose to either be close with or stay as friends.
Just in case we don't get out of this, I wanted to say...
I know, Warren.
Of course you do.
I'm going to make the right choices from now on. I swear.
That's why you're Super Max.
Over here, there's Bitch, whose only purpose in the story is literally, not figuratively, literally, to be a bitch.
This is pretty low-hanging fruit by ER here, but believe it or not, Victoria does actually serve a purpose other than to be a bitch. She certainly plays the stereotypical popular girl at the beginning, but with the right dialogue choices, we get to see another side of Victoria in the latter half of the series, who may not be friends with Max, but can respect her nonetheless.
I am sorry. That's an awesome cashmere coat.
It was. But there'll be another.
Well, you always seem to know how to pick the right outfits.
I do have some talent. Mr. Jefferson told me.
I've seen your pictures. You have a great eye. Richard Avedon-esque.
He's one of my heroes. Thanks, Max. I hope those sluts get me a towel before they hang a sign on me. You deserve a better shot. Sorry about blocking you and the go fuck your selfie.
That was mean, but pretty funny.
Just one of those days, you know?
I know exactly what you mean, Victoria. I'll see you later.
The two learn to agree to disagree, and to me this was one of the most interesting character relationships because of not only how it shifts throughout the series, but also because it shows that Victoria's character is more complicated than what Max, and coincidentally ER, initially thinks of her. The same deal with Chloe, it may not justify her action, but it adds depth to these characters so they're not simple cardboard cutouts.
Do you think it's like fate we're not supposed to be friends?
Why the hell not? We're both into art and photography. We're both kind of weird and pretentious. If we hung out without attitude, we'd get along fine.
I almost asked you to hang out. You said my photos were Avedon-esque. Then I remembered who I was.
You should have asked me. It would have been cool to compare photo notes.
Maybe we're too much alike.
You might be right.
Well, Max Caulfield, there's still time for you to get in the Vortex Club.
I actually hope so, Victoria.
You could have been a major bitch to me when I got hit with that paint, and I deserved it. Max, I don't hate you. I actually think you're one of the coolest people at Blackwell. Weird, but cool. You just don't know it yet. Maybe I'm jealous because you don't give a shit what anybody thinks, and I do. To be honest, Nathan has been freaking me out lately. He's not here, and I haven't seen him.
Just make sure you stay away from him. And stick close to your friends tonight, okay?
I let you boss me around this one time. And I have other people I can go to for protection. Thanks for telling me this, Max. If what you said is true, then you be careful too.
I've got my own protection.
Text me if you need anything.
I will. Thanks, Victoria.
Au revoir.
Ideally, I would have liked it to be a bit more fleshed out, but she is only a side character, so they can't spend ages investing time in her.
There's Nathan Prescott, a red herring. I mean it, his character serves no other purpose than to be a red herring. A blindingly obvious one, you nitwits.
It'll vary between person to person on whether or not they figure out that Nathan is a red herring. Personally, I knew he couldn't be behind everything going on, but he at least played a part in it. His character is much more shallow than Victoria's in my opinion. I understand his motivations, but it's not really given much screen time. Considering that he's more central to the plot than Victoria, these two probably should have been swapped, because the character that's more important ends up being the less complex one.
Message. Message received yesterday at 9 p.m.
Max, it's Nathan. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt Kate or Rachel or I didn't want to hurt anybody. Everybody used me. Mr. Jefferson is coming for me now. All this shit will be over soon. Watch out, Max. He wants to hurt you next. Sorry.
There's Mr. Jefferson, Maxine's photography teacher at hipster bullshit art school and residential serial killer. A real jerk-ass, and problematically, the only character I ever rooted for.
Considering that Jefferson drugs women, plays a hand in the murder of Rachel, and murders other people in potential timelines, I'm just going to assume that ER is goofing around when he says that he roots for him. I would have liked for Jefferson to be foreshadowed a little more as the plot twist villain, or perhaps he was and I was completely oblivious.
Now, almost all of these characters are horrifically written. The dialogue in Life in Tumblr, I can say without exaggeration, is some of the worst I've seen in the medium.
Let's talk business. You got hella cash. You are going to get in hella more trouble for this than drugs.
You hella saved my life.
What the fuck ever? Get off my crack, whore.
Are you serial? You have mad skills, Max.
Awesome sauce? Amazeballs. I've literally just got chills all over my neck.
Not now, Max. I'm contemplating shit.
Good to know Frank has a knife lying around.
I just vaped some dank OG bud.
I fixed everything. Wowzer. 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 I see why Chloe hangs here. She's a steampunk.
But this isn't anime or a video game.
It is hella cold out here.
Hella? I hate that word, no offense. Hella yes! Hella best friends forever. Hella fucking paranoid. Hella insane fucking day. Hella stupid, usually.
Ready for the mosh pit, Shaka Bra.
Most of the examples that ER gives here are use of lingo, and I can definitely see why it would get on some people's nerves. It's used sparingly for all characters with the exception of Chloe, with Max even using Chloe's lingo mockingly, which we see at the end there. Again, as I said before, turning it down just a notch with Chloe would have helped a lot. Her excessive use of the word hella is drilled into our heads, so when we visit the alternate timeline where Chloe hates the word, it's an upfront and obvious indicator that this isn't the Chloe we know. Surface level, yes, and it doesn't excuse the overuse, but it at least serves a purpose rather than being needless chatter. I'll even throw ER a bone here and admit that the knife line and the steampunk line are both pretty bad. Not every line of dialogue is perfect in this game.
It's like a bunch of middle-aged Frenchmen set out to write a bunch of American teenage girls and hit it square on the money. Yeah, you heard me right. Those of you who think this dialogue is either unrealistic, put on, inorganic, or ham-fisted, you haven't been around a great many teenage girls. They do, in fact, talk like this.
Like, oh my god!
I say this also as a man who attended a residential high school for the arts. Unfortunately, don't nod, realism does not equate to good. Realism equaling good is a fallacy that, yes, a lot of people fall prey to. But traditional narrative structure and characterization trumps realism every time.
This is the greatest point that ER makes in his entire video. I absolutely agree that realism in the media does not always equate to good. Given that it's not a matter of realism then, it essentially comes down to whether or not the lingo grinds your gears, so each to their own here.
Speaking of narrative structure, Life is Tumblr's story is a ridiculous, nonsensical clusterfuck of a mess. But I'm not about to make another feature-length film here, so this is the SparkNotes version. Chloe, the blue-haired cunt, strings a submissive Maxine along to help her find her friend Rachel, abusing Maxine's out-of-nowhere magical bullshit time travel powers whenever possible.
I see this argument used a lot in general about a movie or a TV series. People will dismiss something used to jumpstart the narrative as being unrealistic. We just went over the idea that realism doesn't correlate to quality, yet ER is making the claim that Max getting her time rewind powers is bullshit. At the end of the day, Max gets her powers so the narrative can happen. Harry is a wizard so the narrative can happen. Light gets a death note so the narrative can happen. There's a certain amount of disbelief you have to have when consuming media, and while it does vary from person to person, I think it's reasonable to accept the premise of a girl getting time travel powers.
Turns out Rachel was killed by Mr. Jefferson.
Red Herring is the one to actually kill her, but what the fuck ever.
Also, turns out that Maxine's powers randomly jump-started a mini-apocalypse for no reason at all.
The same argument can be applied here, though to be clear, it's not Max's powers that caused the tornado, but rather Max using her powers to save Chloe's life, which changes the timeline and hence causes a disruption in time. The purpose that the apocalypse serves is a mystery that we want to unravel from the beginning, and also so we're given the ultimatum at the climax of the series.
In the end, either Chloe must die or everybody in Arcadia Bay dies for, you guessed it, no reason at all.
This is just lazy at this point. I know that ER is playing it up for comedic effect, but the same joke 3 times in 20 seconds gets a little tiresome. And I thought Chloe saying hella was overused. Chloe's death fixes the rupture of time, since it's what was meant to happen, meaning the apocalypse doesn't occur. You can choose to let Chloe die and time flow as it should, or let Chloe live and instead have the tornado consume Arcadia Bay. It's not the best ultimatum for an episodic narrative, because even if Chloe was the greatest person alive, I would still likely choose to save Arcadia Bay. The choice still hurts to make, as we're essentially letting Chloe die alone at the low point of her life, which is horrible. But it's not a divisive choice that we would see in a Telltale game, and I think divisive choices generate a lot more interesting discussion when everyone has different choices that they've made at the end of the series.
There are a couple of subplots that pretend to be connected with the main one, but either aren't or are just barely. Here are the highlights. Bullying! A girl named Kate can be bullied into suicide. Maxine can either save Kate with her powers or let her die.
This isn't actually criticism, he's just stating what happens in the game. The Kate Marsh subplot was by far my favorite subplot in the game, and honestly I think it rivaled the main plot itself for me. You have the choice to learn several things about Kate throughout the first 2 episodes, then depending on whether or not you correctly remembered those things, you can successfully talk her off the roof.
Kate, your life is still yours, and we can get through this together. Let me help, like I helped by erasing all that crap people wrote on your room slate.
I'm glad to hear you worry about me. That makes me feel better.
Of course I worry. You're my friend, Kate.
I did feel better talking to you on the phone. I always feel like you really listen.
It was done fantastically. I was concerned about Kate from the start and checked up on her when I could to learn things, but I still failed to talk her down because I didn't know enough about her. It took a heavy toll knowing I failed like that, and it left a lasting impact on me for the rest of the series. It's also a massive choice in general to have a character live or die so early in an episodic narrative game, because now there needs to be dialogue options for both timelines for the rest of the game.
Bottles!
Can you find 5 bottles while I prep the shooting range? Thanks, Max.
I agree with ER on this one. There will often be downtime from dialogue choices in these kinds of games to give the player something else to do. It's essential and avoids things from becoming monotonous, giving us a moment to breathe and take things in. But the only problem is that no one's really figured out anything good to put in that downtime, so there's only ever menial puzzles or tasks. The Walking Dead has a better excuse since it was the first of its kind, and all Telltale knew up to that point was adventure games. But Life is Strange is a 2015 game, so they should be coming up with better content than bottle finding. Luckily, this is by far the most egregious of the downtime moments, and it was the only time in the game where it legitimately bothered me. The other instances give the player much more agency in that they have the option to explore the area and have some optional dialogue with side characters to unwind, or they can just power on straight to the next scene, so the choice is up to them.
Insightful commentary on gun rights.
Thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Back up, back up!
Gun?
Papadoo! You fucking killed my dog!
Oh my god!
This is a non-issue. Chloe is simply making a joke by rearranging the term gun control. There isn't any overbearing agenda by the developers to push beliefs on gun control. I will point out here though that stupid gun is by far the most hilariously bad line I've ever heard in the entire game. For a second I even thought that ER edited that in because it was too funny to be real.
The Butterfly Effect. Maxine visits an alternate timeline where Chloe is not an abominable thunder cunt. Instead, she's a cripple in horrible acute pain due to a car crash. Life is Tumblr tries to pretend this is worse.
It's not portrayed as a worse universe. We're just seeing things from Max's perspective, and Max values Chloe's friendship more than her relationship with Chloe's dad. It makes Max sound pretty evil when it's put that simply, but you have to keep in mind that Max created this timeline by saving Chloe's dad from death in an attempt to make Chloe's life better. This entire sequence is done for the purposes of showing Max that she can never make everything right. There will always be injustices in Chloe's life, no matter how much she goes back in time.
This guy's whole character.
I was eating those bees! Ugh!
You eat like a pig. Try the floor.
I was eating those beans. Are you fucking insane? I was eating those bees! Ugh! Ugh!
A Silent Hill-esque nightmare sequence where Life is Tumblr is actually self-aware?
I only wanted to do the right thing. No, you only wanted to be popular. And once you got these amazing powers, your big plan was to trick people into thinking you give a rat's ass. You're a goddamn hypocrite. You fucked up time and space for your precious punk Chloe. Do you really think she's our friend? That she respects us in any way? Man, you are so stupid.
Holy shit, can this be it? Is the developer finally gonna call out their audience on liking such a gigantic pile of shit? Nope. Lesbians. Kind of. Maybe. I'm not sure. It's not especially clear. And so much more insubstantial bullcrap.
The option to kiss Chloe is taken based on previous choices you made, so it's entirely optional if you want to take that route or not. It's the same deal with Warren's character, where you can choose to pursue a relationship with either of the characters if it interests you. Both are equally half-baked in my opinion. They're just there so there's some form of romance for Max to have, but it's really just a side dish to the main story. It likely isn't clear to ER because he hasn't played the game. All he's seen is someone else's playthrough, so he's assumed that it's a concrete part of the game.
Alright, to get into specifically why and how none of these characters and plots come together would be an impossibly lengthy feat, so instead I'll focus on the central story / game mechanic of Life is Tumblr, Maxine's time manipulation powers. Let's be honest, time travel in fiction mostly sucks. Not because it's unrealistic or, God forbid, unscientific, because by most accounts it would appear that time travel is fundamentally impossible. So yes, in fiction some laws of physics must be bent to pull it off. The problem, however, rests with the fact that so few stories will stick to their own made-up laws.
I fully agree with this. No matter how it's done, the use of time travel in a narrative will inevitably end up with some complications and impossibilities. So the best you can really do is come up with a strict set of rules and constantly abide by them so as not to confuse the player.
For starters, there's no reason given as to why Maxine suddenly receives time manipulation powers. None. So fuck that very much.
We already went over this argument earlier in the video. The devs could have easily made up some lore behind the time travel powers and why Max has them, but that's not the focus of the game. We simply don't care. No one was cut up over not learning about where the first ever wizard came from in Harry Potter, because that wasn't the focus of the plot.
Blimey, Harry, didn't you ever wonder where your mum and dad learned it all?
What?
You're a wizard, Harry.
Out of nowhere magical bullshit.
Death Note? As in a notebook of death?
Out of nowhere magical bullshit.
We accepted that Harry was a wizard and we moved on because that's what we were interested in. There is just a certain amount of disbelief you have to suspend when you're consuming media, and everyone's tolerance level is different.
Let's break down her power. Maxine's shtick is to reverse time a la Riley Rewind. When she goes back too far, which is only a minute or so, she gets a headache, and if her powers need to cut off at a story dramatic moment, she gets a fuck you nosebleed. While Maxine can reverse the world around her, she herself stays stationary. But this means that Maxine's manipulating both time and space, that she has the ability to spatially warp herself across a short distance. In essence, she's teleporting. To illustrate this, if a minute ago Maxine stood in one spot, but then moved to another spot and went back in time a minute, it would be as if she jump cut herself from over there to over here. However, nobody in this world acknowledges this. Maxine will teleport before their eyes and they simply do not care. When Chloe asks for proof of Maxine's power, a simple teleportation could have done the trick, but Life is Tumblr never thought of that, so it doesn't happen. The game acknowledges her spatial powers in a small number of puzzles and Chloe accepts her teleporting at least once, but other than that, Maxine is teleporting all over the damn place and nobody gives half a flying fuck.
This is a fair point. I would be lying if it didn't baffle me for a short while. The reason the game allows Max to move back in time while staying in the same place in space is for puzzles and obstacles that she can overcome with her time powers that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Obviously, the game devs wanted to let the player use their time powers for things other than just sheer dialogue, so it at least has a purpose in the game. If it didn't contribute to anything, then it would be a needlessly complicated caveat to her powers, but it enables the player to take on a slew of tasks they otherwise couldn't possibly do.
She can make herself a billionaire or god empress of the world, but she doesn't even attempt to experiment with her newfound powers. She barely even uses them to boost her photography career. Like, why wouldn't you... Fuck!
This argument can be used for any single use of time travel in media. It's not specific to Life is Strange. I was so excited when ER agreed that traditional narrative structure trumps realism every time, and now he's just nitpicking why Max doesn't abuse time travel to become a trillionaire.
Additionally, Maxine has the power to look into her photographs and teleport back in time to when they were taken. Why can she do this? I don't know. Why doesn't she go back to the earliest photos she's taken and take over the world? God damn it!
ER brings up a very valid point here and then immediately derails it so he can resort to his menial time travel argument again. I guess I'll just have to argue for him here since he can't argue for himself. The introduction of using photos to travel back in time admittedly felt a little cheap. It's a great idea in itself, since Max is a photographer and this might have been the devs' initial idea of how they wanted the time travel to work. If this was the only method, however, it would mean that Max wouldn't be able to quickly and effectively rewind time so the player can make different dialogue choices. So likely they just decided to try and get away with having both methods of time travel in there at once. It can work, it just probably should have been introduced to us earlier, because we don't start time traveling with photos until episode 3.
Now, from what little we really know, there's no multiple worlds interpretation going on in Life is Tumblr. Maxine does alter her timeline into a different appearing timeline by changing the past and thus the future. For instance, from one where Chloe is a cunt and Maxine is unpopular, to one where Chloe is nice and Maxine herself can sit at the cool kids table. But since she has no memory of living in the new timeline upon returning to the new present, it's almost like she switched over to a parallel universe where she just killed the consciousness of the host body to replace it with her own out-of-time consciousness. But why would her affecting her own timeline prompt her to switch over to a parallel universe's timeline that she hadn't previously affected?
He continues on for a few more minutes, discussing alternate timelines and universes, but I'm going to cut him off here since he's starting to contradict himself. His argument was at his strongest when he pointed out the most overt flaws in Max's time powers, but he already admitted that time travel is fundamentally impossible, despite the fact that he's now trying to criticize the time travel in Life is Strange for not being fundamentally possible. The narrative is written coherently enough that all uses of time travel are straightforward enough to make sense. I was never confused by the time travel at any point during my playthrough, and quoting ER once again, traditional narrative structure trumps realism every time. By ER's prior logic, if the time travel makes sense to the player and contributes meaningfully to the narrative, then there shouldn't be a problem. Let's move on to another argument because this hair splitting over time is just becoming obnoxious.
As it turns out, the butterfly effect is actually in the process of very gradually creating a stationary super tornado with hilariously little wind speed to kill everybody. And in the meanwhile, it's getting off on killing birds and whales and duplicating the moon and shit, which is dumb.
He brushes over it really quickly here, but this was actually one of the biggest issues that I had with the game. At the end of each episode, there's a natural phenomenon that occurs, and they become increasingly strange and bizarre as the series goes on. The beached whales I can get behind because that's something that could probably happen, but when there's duplicate moons, my eyes glaze over a little. It just felt kind of tacky that every episode had to end with a phenomenon, and they're never really referenced or woven into the story. They're just tossed in at the last minute of every episode. So in this case, it's something that's unrealistic, but it also doesn't contribute meaningfully to the narrative.
But wait, Maxine realizes that the super tornado can be cancelled out if Chloe dies at the start of the game like she would have originally if Maxine hadn't manipulated time to save her. How does she ever come to that conclusion? Plot, baby. It's all for the plot.
They figure it out in episode 5 when Max believes that her excessive manipulation of time is what caused the tornado. But Chloe points out that the tornado only started forming when Max saved Chloe from dying in episode 1, the very first alteration in time that she made. This is a pretty easy one, and I don't know how ER doesn't know this. Even from watching someone else's gameplay, it's directly explained.
Max! This is the only way.
I feel like I took the shot 1,000 years ago.
You could use that photo to change everything right back to when you took that picture. All that would take is for me to...
Fuck that! No way!
Maybe you've just been delaying my real destiny. Look at how many times I've almost died or actually died around you. Look at what's happened in Arcadia Bay ever since you first saved me. I know I've been selfish, but for once, I think I should accept my fate. Our fate.
But why is killing Chloe, and only Chloe, the only way to stop the tornado and save Arcadia Bay? Where's the direct correlation? What's to stop Maxine from using her powers to, say, dump a bucket of paint on these bitches later on? And why wouldn't that have a catastrophic butterfly effect? Why didn't anything else she manipulated have the same sort of effect?
If I used ER's level of nitpicking, I could say that we don't actually know for sure that Max's other choices aren't causing repercussions in the world, either through adding to the strength of the tornado or forming another catastrophe entirely, and the tornado is just taking precedence because it happened earlier. To give a proper answer though, there are a few different theories behind the tornado. One is that the blue butterfly from the beginning of episode 1 is what actually prevents the tornado from happening. When Chloe is shot, the butterfly is startled and flies away, and the beat of its wings contribute to the butterfly effect and cancel out a tornado that was otherwise going to form. Which is why when Chloe is saved and the butterfly isn't startled, the tornado does form, because the butterfly's wings don't cancel it out. This is an okay theory, but I find it a little silly because it means Chloe's death isn't really significant to the tornado, and it's a very literal use of the butterfly effect. The other theory, which I personally believe in, is that Chloe is destined to die no matter what, and when Max defies the flow of time by altering Chloe's fate, the natural order of the universe tries to fix things by creating this tornado. To put it more simply, it's a Final Destination type deal. Chloe cheated death, so death needs to be satisfied in some other way. If not Chloe's death, then all of Arcadia Bay. Either way, the lore behind the tornado isn't really that important. For the most part, it is just a plot device. If neither of those theories appeal to you, then I can see why it might be frustrating.
The time travel is broken and stupid, and Maxine is fucking ignorant. And that's not even the worst part.
Chloe! I can't make this choice! No, Max. You're the only one who can.
That's right, only one decision matters to the story. One. No matter what you do, no matter how you play the game, you will only ever arrive at this singular, all-encompassing decision. And here it is.
EI is right in the sense that if you choose to sacrifice Chloe, technically your prior choices are all undone, since Max goes back to when Chloe is shot and stays there. He fails to mention that this has already happened many times over where Max has gone back in time, and hence technically undone previous choices you've made, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and assuming that he trimmed it to save time in the video, and this is certainly the biggest case of it in the game anyway. It's a fair argument. If you're a stickler for having lots of alternate endings in your narrative games, I can see why this would frustrate some people. I will say that it's about the journey and not the destination. Kate Marsh's suicide doesn't mean any less to me because I sacrificed Chloe and in the new timeline, Kate might live instead. The choices I made still matter to me, but I accept that there are some people who will be pissed off about this, so I'll give this one to ER.
Kill the cunt, save the bae. Keep her alive, kill everybody else. Gee, I don't know if I can decide between the...
I mentioned this earlier, but this was one of my biggest gripes that I had with the game. The fact that the climactic choice you make isn't really that divisive was a problem for me. I really like choices that split the player base in two because it generates way more discussion.
When you kill Chloe, well, you get to go all lesbians. Who would have guessed?
Again, this is optional based on your prior choices. ER just isn't aware of this because he hasn't played the game.
And then Maxine kills and replaces her past self to ensure that Chloe is shot in a filthy high school bathroom. Hold up, but if Maxine never manipulated time to save Chloe, then she would have never had to go back in time to stop herself from manipulating time to save Chloe, so how does that plot? Just plot.
ER makes a good point here. The logic is very circular when the universe gives Max powers, but her use of those powers disrupts the universe. It's a pretty big leap to make to just sweep this under the rug and accept it. It does let the entire narrative happen, so I gave it a pass, but I can't deny that it is pretty dumb.
Life is Tumblr tries to make us care about Chloe dying with an overextended funeral scene where everybody who didn't even know her shows up for some fucking reason.
Most of the people at her funeral are the students that she shared a class with before she was expelled from Blackwell. and Warren, I assume, is there because Max brought him along. If ER had played the game, he would probably know this.
All the while, there's this god-awful hipster music playing over it. What happened, Don't Nod?
This is just ER's personal preference that he doesn't like the music. The game has a consistent type of music in its soundtrack throughout, so it's just keeping in style with that. Orchestras sound fantastic, but they're not universally applicable to every game.
The other ending, which the developers clearly didn't anticipate anybody choosing, is a much shorter sequence where Maxine and Chloe drive through the wreckage of Arcadia Bay with more god-awful hipster music.
Same arguments here, the music is up to your personal taste.
And to think, this was Don't Nod's first real success. This is what garnered them attention and acclaim. And so this is what they will make more of.
Well, congratulations, you made it to the end of ER's media criticism and to the end of my bone-dry dissection. So what did we learn? ER successfully pointed out a lot of flaws in the game, and I fully give him credit for that. Unfortunately, I think he muddied the waters a lot through nitpicking, some self-contradictions, and ultimately not even focusing on the criticisms where he was fully justified. I don't believe that he paints a fair picture of the game here at all, and at the end of the day, these complaints are from someone who hasn't even played the game, so it's difficult to take his criticism seriously. Life is Strange is nowhere near perfect, which honestly shouldn't be surprising, considering it's Don't Nod's first foray into the genre. There was certainly a degree of wasted potential and some leaps of logic, but obviously the game had a charm that captured a lot of people. As narrative adventure games go, it was nice to see something from a company other than Telltale for a change, and Don't Nod made a really great story that had a lasting impact on me and many others. That's about all I have for this video. If you agree or disagree with me, feel free to let me know in the comments, and tell me what your thoughts are on the game. Thank you very much for watching.
Being together this week, it was the best farewell gift I could have hoped for. You're my hero, Max.
Oh, Chloe! I'm gonna miss you so much!
I'll always love you. Now get out of here, please. Do it before I freak. And Max Caulfield, don't you forget about me. Never.